often during the preseason we talk about the calm before the storm as we hit big preseason news, injuries, role changes. But this year really hasn't been a whole lot. There's not a whole lot that moves the needle. So in order, we don't want to make moves just to look busy on the site, but what has moved the needle for you so far in this preseason, Chris?
Not much, because you look at performance. The Giants haven't looked good. Trent Richardson hasn't looked good. There's certain guys like that, and you think, well, let's see how well that correlates to what happens in the regular season. It correlates poorly. It doesn't really matter as long as these are the guys with the jobs. Trent Richardson arguably could lose it, but Vic Ballard's already hurt. Ahmad Bradshaw's not a guy who's going to be able to get 250 carries. He just had too many injuries and had too much mileage at this point. So, there's nothing really moving the needle. Usually by this time there's some horrible injury that happens to somebody, and it just hasn't happened. And you think, okay, that's great news for everybody. Well, it's great news for everybody except the zero running back guys, right? I mean, if you do a zero running back draft in July, part of the reason that that's a good strategy is because even stuff that happens in training camp, it can benefit you when backups end up getting the role. So far, it hasn't panned out. I've certainly, not drafted kickers and defenses and just stashed extra running backs on my teams, which is kind of similar, knowing that a lot of stuff happens in camp, and it just hasn't happened. My rankings now are not that different from my rankings a month ago.
Well, I think it actually helps the zero running back guys because there's not this rush to pick up everybody yet. You can actually draft some of them still. There hasn't been that fallout. So, the people that aren't doing zero running back, I mean, they have fewer guys maybe, or maybe they're not onto some of these targets. Perhaps they're not feeling that desperation to find that. I don't know. I'm just throwing that out there, spitballing.
Well, I guess we got to just clarify. I'm saying zero running back if you drafted before this point, right? Like if you drafted, say, like my NFC draft was in July, right? So I went heavy running back, but had I gone zero running back, I would have thought that by now, right, 3 weeks later, that 3.5 weeks later, that there would be a couple of running back injuries that would already possibly have benefited me, and it just hasn't happened. And the same thing for my teams that, in the Yahoo format where you don't have to take a defense or kicker, and I have extra running backs stashed, I would think that by now I would have one of my lottery tickets, not necessarily mine cash, but somebody's would cash, and it could have been mine. And that just hasn't happened. So, yeah, going forward, it's good for the zero running back guys because nobody's priced up. That's true.
What about the dual arrests of Le'Veon Bell and LeGarrette Blount? Does that do anything for you? Did you move these guys at all because of this?
No, I did not change their projections one bit. And it's funny because a lawyer who practices, he's a criminal defense attorney who practices in Pennsylvania, which is the state law that applies here, called into the XM show yesterday while he was driving. He said he's telling all his friends that they're going to get suspended 8 games, but really there's almost zero chance they get suspended at all this year because it has to work its way through the legal system. It's only a misdemeanor. There's no evidence that these guys have been in trouble with any substance abuse before. That probably would have come out, in the media in the last couple of days had that been the case. It hasn't come out that this is their second shot or whatever. So usually the first offense is a fine anyway. Secondly, in terms of the legal, they usually let the legal case work itself out first. That can take many months. So it's a very, very slight chance for a misdemeanor arrest that this would impact their season this year. So no, I did not move them one bit.
Right. Now, you have Bell as our number 11 back, at least on the site, between Giovanni Bernard at 10 and Marshawn Lynch at 12. Now, I know, and just talking to you on the show, you're not like the biggest backer of Le'Veon Bell. Part of that, I think, has got to be his yards per carry last year.
Yeah, he wasn't very efficient. Garrett Blunt's there probably will steal at least some of the goal line looks. So it's not like Bell is like the small scat back. He's a big guy also. So there's no reason in their no huddle to take him out if they're rolling with it and it's a short yardage situation. But yeah, maybe LeGarrette Blount gets 6 touchdowns. The backup usually gets 3 or 4, usually, right? So it's like a couple extra get subtracted. Maybe he gets 8 and 4 get subtracted. That's a little bit more significant. But he's going to do well in PPR. He's going to get 40, 50 catches if he stays healthy. And then he's going to get the yardage, obviously, with those. So I think they drafted him to be their guy. He did enough last year to show that he was good enough. He came into the season as their guy, and I don't really, everybody in the second round at running back pretty much has their warts. I got him late third in the Yahoo Friends and Family League, and I don't even like him. A lot of people like him more than I do, but that's, but great. I'll take him. I'll take him there.
That was a weird draft. I drafted it in one spot, which I don't think I like, to be honest with you. At least the way I prefer to build teams. I was next to Michael Salfino, who is the king of promoting zero running back and doing it everywhere. So I knew that any wide receiver was going to get scarce anyhow, and it's just a big wide receiver year. I kind of fell into that. I took receivers at the turn, the 2-3 turn. Uh,
Who'd you take?
I took old guys too. I took like Pierre Garcon. I'm trying to remember. I play in too many leagues already, and I still
Right.
have like 5 drafts left.
I've got like
But
three, yeah.
they got priced up pretty good. I think I got like Andre Johnson, Pierre Garcon, something of that nature there. And then he took Cordero Patterson at 3.2. I almost took it. I just felt like I couldn't pull the trigger that early on him. Maybe I should have taken a running back there. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't mind. I don't mind getting the elite running back and two receivers. I mean, I like Andre Johnson at that spot,
I did
and
too.
I don't love Garcon. I actually got him in the Stopa League because he was $10, and I had to take. I was like, wow, that's crazy cheap. But he's not a guy I
Right.
really like. I think instead of getting 180 targets, he gets like 135 this year, which is a huge drop off. Maybe he gets more efficient, but there's more red zone people now with Reed back, and Sean Jackson's not a red zone guy, but he'll take the top off the defense a couple of times. It's just a more crowded situation now.
Oh, I lied, by the way. I got Victor Cruz and not Andre Johnson at that
Okay.
turn.
I'm fine with either of those guys. I think they're both comparable. Both are going to see a lot of targets. Andre Johnson, in a way, I think is safer, just because even though I think the
Yeah.
preseason means nothing, I'm getting a little bit like, well, the Giants look so bad, and Eli's been bad for a while now. I'm a little
Mhm.
nervous about Cruz, whereas Andre Johnson is a Hall of Fame receiver who had 3,000 yards the last 2 years. I know he was like 33 or whatever. He's getting up there, but he's, while receivers decline at that age, we're talking about maybe one of the top 8 receivers of all time, maybe.
Yeah.
So I would make somewhat of an exception for him. But man, when I drafted, it was so easy. I was drafting 12. I took AJ Green. I took him over Julio Jones only because I have Jones in so many places, but I probably like Jones slightly better. Green's a little safer. Way back, I took Brandon Marshall at 3/4 of PPR. And then it was Le'Veon Bell and Spiller in 3-4. It's a 14-team league. It was like just everything just dropped to me so easily and perfectly. And I wrote about it. I was like, it wasn't even fun. It was like, this is like a robot could make this draft. It was like the picks were so obvious every round.
I felt like I didn't have obvious choices. Now I had the handicap of I was doing the show while we were doing the draft, at least for the first 5 or 6 rounds. That it's harder to track things and talk and draft all at the same time and think about what you're going to do. Not to make it too much of an excuse, because you still got like a minute and a half for each pick. But it's a little bit of a different experience. But I don't think it would have changed my draft that much. Maybe I would have, instead of Garcon, maybe I would have taken Andre Johnson, or instead of Cruz, I would have taken Andre Johnson. But I was pretty much committed to taking 2 wide receivers there, knowing that what was going to come back to me, knowing that we have 2 flex spots. We'll see. It's interesting. Then the other thing about that draft was it was the extreme quarterback chicken draft. So many teams waited on quarterbacks.
I should have waited. I got Nick Foles in the 10th, and I should have waited one more round because RG3 was there in the 11th, and I took the Seattle defense in the 11th. There's only 14 rounds in the whole draft. And I thought, you know what, if RG3 comes back in 12, which was 6 picks later or 5 picks later, I was going to take him just to punish people, even if I had to drop him in 2 weeks.
Right.
And a guy did take him. But I should have just taken RG3, who I was 50-50 on in round 10 in round 11. The reason that they play chicken on quarterbacks in that league and why that's a little bit of a weird setup and maybe not optimal is that you only have to start one. The benches are so small you can't really carry 2 with the bye weeks.
Right.
I mean, there's just no
I
way.
agree.
There's no IR slot. I mean, you get no injured slot. So like you have to drop. You can't carry 2. So this is the one draft where what replacement is at quarterback. It's quarterback 14. It's not quarterback 18 because 4 people take. I mean, someone may take a backup, but it's really not a big concern. So you're getting Rivers or Roethlisberger or whoever with your last. Roethlisberger was undrafted. You're getting that guy with your last pick. So
Right.
why would you use any kind of any amount of resources to take Andrew Luck or Nick Foles or RG3 beyond like a 10th or an 11th or whatever, when a guy who's probably going to throw if he plays 16 games close to 30 touchdowns and 4,300 yards is going to be there for free. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
The ultimate replacement value that is so high for quarterback.
Yeah, this league illustrates why I like to play at least super flex, if not 2 QBs. I got Matt Ryan at 10.14, and I'll take that any day when I'm playing weight on the quarterbacks, of course. So yeah, it was an interesting draft as far as that goes. Let's talk about some of the trendy guys. See if you like them. See where maybe some of these guys are getting a little bit of their gravity here. Cody Latimer on the early draft pick by the Denver Broncos. Emmanuel Sanders has been banged up in the preseason. Nothing that portends to him being out during the season, but still, he hasn't done anything yet. I think people are getting a little nervous, and they like Latimer's skills. Right now, he starts the year as like the number 4 wide receiver for this Broncos team, but a lot of people think he could be something special there.
And remember, he's really number 5 because Julius Thomas is there too, right? So he's
True.
basically like a number 2 receiver. So you have Thomas and Welker and Sanders, and then you have Latimer. Now, injuries happen. It's a great offense to be part of. I certainly see the case for it. I kind of prefer Devontae Adams. It's kind of a very similar situation in Green Bay because because really it's just Nelson and Cobb, and then nobody's really that established. There's no tight end that's just jumped out. Maybe it's Richard Rodgers. Who knows? Maybe Jared Boykin follows up his year, has another good year, but he's not especially established. And Cobb and Nelson have both been hurt a good deal in their careers. So I think there's a better path for Devontae Adams than Latimer.
I have Adams in a couple places, so I agree with you there. The second-year wide receivers are always trendy. This year, a couple of guys that have gotten a lot of love in drafts. Of course, Cordero Patterson's been one. Justin Hunter's another. Tennessee, now, it's Jake Locker. We got some mistrust issues with him. They also have some other guys at our options, but Hunter seems to be getting a lot of love lately. I can't disagree with that. I like the measurables. I like the size and speed with him. The other receivers they have in that receiving core aren't really red zone guys. Hunter could be huge this year.
He could be, but I mean, think about it. Kendall Wright's going to get his targets, right? He catches like 90 balls. He's going to get his 130 targets or whatever. Okay, so that's a lot of targets right there. Delaney Walker gets targets, right? I mean, he's going to get his 80, 90 targets as a tight end. He gets targeted. Nate Washington, is he going to be gone? I don't know. He'll probably get 70 targets, right? So Hunter, I mean, in an offense that doesn't throw a whole lot with a quarterback that's not especially good, it is a pretty bad setup for him. Now, if he's just really that good, none of those guys that I mentioned are good enough to really stop him. He doesn't really have a real obstacle. When Mike Trout came up to the Angels, there was 5 guys in his way, none of whom were any good. It's like there were bodies there in his way, but there were bodies you could kind of just walk over. They weren't people really standing in his way. So I do think there's some upside. I just think the floor is low. I'm not sure. I don't know that they're going to give him the shot. He certainly profiles as the type of guy like an Alshon Jeffrey that could do it. The problem just is that in Chicago, the Mark Trestman's offense and Josh McCown, when Cutler went down playing so well also, was a huge part of that Jeffrey story. And I don't know if we have the other parts around there also.
Right. Okay, you've done about as many drafts as I have, if not more. Who have you seen that's been a trendy guy who's rising in your drafts that you're talking about here?
There's a few guys that I don't like very much that have been rising up, and one of them is Brandon Cooks. In a non-PPR, I just really don't see him as viable. I mean, maybe in the 10th round, but he's not going to be there. In PPR, I get it, but even so, I mean, you have Kenny Stills, who's the second-year receiver, who's great in the targets he got last year, and that nobody's drafted him, and yet he's the guy who could take the leap over the rookie. I think Cooks will be good in a PPR. He'll be Sproles-ish, which was very valuable, but he'll qualify for receiver. It's a little different instead of running back. They also have Colston still there. They also have, obviously, Jimmy Graham there. So I think Cooks is being overdrafted. It's not someone I want a part of, but he's very trendy right now. Jordan Matthews was trendy. Then he dropped a couple passes. Then he kind of surged a little at the end of preseason. He's getting trendy again. I just don't know what the roles are going to be in that offense. I suppose that's good because maybe his role will be big, but I just think it's just totally wide open. The guy that's trendy that I think is actually, I think it might be legit is Kelvin Benjamin. I mean, he looks like he's good. He's got the job. He is probably the number 1 guy. He has the size. I don't know who else Cam Newton's really going to throw to there. I think that's actually the most promising trendy guy of the bunch.
Yeah, and the question for him is, does he have the speed? I think that
he doesn't. But you don't need that much when you're that size.
Right, especially if the thing is, he was considered a raw guy that maybe had some trouble running routes and things like that. But you know what? That could be overrated. Could just be a case where he wasn't used that much at Florida State because they didn't need to. Carolina's going to need him right away.
Hey, Demaryius Thomas was considered raw too coming out of college.
Yeah.
So just keep that in mind. Hey, Jeff, I got to wrap this up.
I agree. I was ready to wrap it up anyhow. So your timing's good. Chris, good talking to you.
Yeah.
And we'll do this again next week. Thanks a lot for watching RotoWire TV, folks.
Cool, man. Thanks, dude. I got to run.
Right.
I got to look at
like the funeral.
Thanks, man. Thanks.
See ya.